You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 423, our Obi-Wan Kenobi series review / discussion. So we all knew this day would come. We woke up Wednesday mornings, and unfortunately, there was no Obi-Wan Kenobi to view on television. Well, at least no new episodes. And we thought, since we spent so much time going into this episode, or the series really, and talking about it, and had a show for every one of the episodes, that we'd kind of come back, give you this retrospective look, and talk about all of the things that happened in a very exciting series, and maybe kind of talk about some things that may happen in the future, and certainly how it could or might have changed how we see some of the movies that come out as part of the Skywalker saga. And speaking of sagas, I had nothing there. Jonesy's with us tonight. Jonesy, you've got the Bono glasses going on, so I don't know if that's intentional, but looking pretty good there, my friend. How are you doing?
I appreciate it, man. How are you today?
I'm good. This was almost a show that never happened because we had some technical difficulties before it started, but we got them all sorted out.
So weird. Less than 24 hours ago, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden we have problems the next day. But, oh yeah, I mean, it goes, you just got to go with it. We figure it out.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right, man. That was really weird to not have something to watch yesterday. It was really strange.
Well, we have, if you're a big Star Wars, if you're a Marvel fan, there's the Ms. Marvel is on.
Yeah,
right
Ms.
now.
Marvel's on. What do you think about them putting Ms. Marvel, quote unquote, against Obi-Wan Kenobi? I mean, did Disney really think like the two properties are maybe diverse enough or separate enough with different fan bases that wouldn't be a conflict, or they were just doubling down on Wednesday? I don't know why they wouldn't do like a Wednesday is Star Wars, Friday is Marvel. And I thought that was the whole idea. Like Friday is the new Wednesday, thing that they were doing with, what was it, Loki and something else.
Yeah, I don't know. It's curious that they would do that. I would at least, I mean, I might be in an echo chamber, but in the circles that I fly around with in social media, everybody that watches the Star Wars stuff is all watching Ms. Marvel.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of discussion about that. Now I think Ms. Marvel's probably getting a lot more attention because at least at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., whenever the show is over, everybody that it was in my circles were talking about Star Wars. There were a couple people that chose to watch Ms. Marvel instead. But now it's like, if you're up at that hour, it's like, that's it. All those same people are still up. We're just talking about Ms. Marvel instead of Star Wars. So I don't know. It's very interesting that they would do that, especially when they've got, 7 other days of the week. Why do you choose to put both of them on, on the same day? So
yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. But speaking of things besides Star Wars, even though we talked Star Wars yesterday, you and I had the pleasure of hanging out with the folks over at Idle Musings of the Nerd Mind, another podcast here on the network. And actually, Richard Williams is here with us, one of the hosts over there with Matt and Stephanie. And we had a really good time. We did a show last night. I don't know when it's going to actually be released. Hopefully the next day or so, I guess. But
yeah,
a lot of fun. We talked a little bit of Kenobi, talked some He-Man. That got some really interesting conversation going.
Well,
just kind of all over the place, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a really, really fun show, kind of all over the place, but that's what they do. It's really this potpourri of different nerd topics. And we got to talk about, we actually talked a little bit, like you said, about non-Star Wars things, which was kind of weird and refreshing at the same time. So, but yeah, Richard is, I've got his little picture here up on YouTube. Man, you're looking pretty good there, buddy, with your glasses like that.
He is, man, looking sharp.
Pretty dang sharp there. You should see him with his cowboy hat. He's a real Texan. But yeah, no, we had a great time. And of course, their show, Idle Musings of Nerd Kind, is as a part of the Earglue Media Network. So you can find all of their shows on the website. We'll put some links in our show notes as well. But please go check them out if you're looking for just a kind of wide variety of different nerd topics that they discuss at any given night whenever they go live. So
eargluemedia.com/idle musings.
Oh, well, thank you. Nice little plug there. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So, but yeah, great time. In fact, we got to talk about, like you said, Kenobi, and what you're going to do more of tonight here, talking about Kenobi. A lot of things, but before we get into that, what else do we got? We got some news.
Yeah.
You threw some stuff in here that
I did. I'm happy to run through it like usual. Tuesday, the 28th, Shadow of the Sith came out by Adam Christopher. So that's super exciting news that it's finally out in the open. We can start talking spoilers here relatively soon. The audiobook is out there too. William Demerit is the one doing the narration of the reading of the audiobook and does a really good job. Very different than Jonathan Davis and what some of the
Mark
others have done.
Thompson.
Yeah, Mark Thompson. Thank you. Yeah. Kind of more along the lines of Jonathan Davis than Mark Thompson and with the way that he reads it. But again, really, really good. Great sound effects, all that good stuff. But
Has he done a Star Wars book before?
I don't remember if he has. It's been a while, but I want to say I do remember his name on one.
Okay.
But a wonderful voice, though, in general. Just you could just listen to him for days. But anyway, the book is fantastic. Go grab it, especially if you felt like you were maybe missing some things going into Force Awakens or maybe missing some things going into Rise of Skywalker. This book does an amazing job of really helping fill some of those voids that maybe some of us left a little bit lacking or that felt just vacant, right? That, maybe we wanted a little bit of extra information, what was going on, like a certain Sith blade, what's actually behind all of that.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't explain why the little thing comes out with the Death Star, but I mean, but you get some of the things about the blade, and it's a pretty good story. It's really good. So I'm really excited.
If you're into Rey's parents and you thought like you got shorted on their background and whether or not they were,
I wasn't going to give that part away.
Well, I mean, it's out now. So, I mean, that's not a big spoiler. I mean, they're explored here in the book. In fact, I think the excerpt had talked about it a little bit too, but
yeah,
that right there alone is, for me, was kind of worth the price of admission, because I won't spoil who they are and what they do and their relationship with Rey or anything, but it's nothing that I expected at all. I was completely floored by it. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But great book.
Really good story. Really quick read for as long as it is. I mean, long as I guess figured, or, everyone kind of interprets that a bit differently, but what was it, like 450, 460, but it's like 67 chapters. That doesn't always give you a great indicator, but
right.
So pretty healthy book, but I think the audiobook was really only like 15 hours or something. It was really short. So it kind of gives you an idea of how quick some of the chapters go.
There are some smaller ones in there, especially towards the middle and the very end.
Right. Today is Thursday, June 30th when we're recording this. And if anybody was not under a Star Wars rock today, Star Wars Celebration in London started selling tickets today. So a lot go for it. Did you get, well, that was one of the questions. Did you get your tickets?
Nope.
Did you
I was in queue. I tried. Yes. I was in queue for about an hour and 20 minutes before it came up. And when I got in, all of the 4-day were sold out, and I didn't even look beyond that because that's all I was really going to shoot for. I'm not saying I won't throw in the towel on this, because there's probably tickets that are going to come up. I'll take a look at those and see what they're like, but it's just really difficult because if it was in the US, not a big deal, right? But now you're talking about rolling the dice, getting tickets at a reasonable price at this point that someone's given up. I haven't even seen any information on if they're using the same ticket service that they use for the US tickets.
Right.
But then on top of that, still trying to get hotel and airfare and all that stuff. So I don't know.
There's a lot of logistics, that go into it.
Yeah. So, and I know there's a lot of people that were all in. I mean, I saw the post today. People were posting their wait times and then screenshots of what happened. A lot of folks that I knew were trying to get in were like, well, that's kind of a deciding factor for me. If I didn't get a 4-day ticket, I sure as heck ain't flying out there to England for, a day or 2 days or even 3 days. I want to stay for the whole thing. So
some people really took a chance because they'd already booked their stuff as soon as they announced it. Like 3 weeks ago. They went ahead and started booking flights and hotels and everything just to hedge their bets. But like you said, these 4-day passes, so the 4-day total passes sold out in about an hour is what I read, which is insane, right? But it also shows you that pent-up demand for the folks overseas, as well as just the general excitement to get back over or get back into this and do it again, right?
Yeah.
And how well this last one went. Now, last I read, though, you could get 4 individual day tickets still. But the price of that, I think actually Becca may have posted this. The price of that is over $100 more or $150 more. And actually, maybe it was Charles Soule's assistant. Actually, Tommy and I were sending messages back and forth today. But he was saying that it's like $150 more. So it really kind of like price gouging. It kind of feels like, why don't you just sell more of the 4-day tickets? I get not everybody wants to go for 4 days or spend all of that. So I do get that on the surface, but still. So there are tickets out there. I didn't go and look and see which ones were still all available and all of that. And I was told, though, when I was talking to some other folks, that kind of keep getting in the queue and checking, because some people were holding them, and then just to see for whatever reason they were holding them, and then they would let some of them go, and they would just buy 2 tickets instead of 4 or something like that. Now most of that has probably passed, but at least earlier today. So don't give up hope, folks. There will be a resale market. There always is a legit resale market. So don't give up hope.
But the question I have is really about, I'm curious as to how many tickets they actually had available, like compared to like what they've had in celebrations past, and how many people they're expecting to attend. I think you and I talked about this. It felt like Chicago was larger, more organized. This one felt smaller, unorganized in a lot of ways. And I don't know.
Some of that might be venue, though.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, depending on the venue and how many seats they've got available, or what they feel like is the capacity for certain things, that probably played into how many tickets. Well, it would play into how many tickets are available. So it just felt like those went, I mean, they didn't go incredibly fast, but the problem was the queue was longer than I think I've ever been in a queue. Like the last 2 times I bought tickets, I was not in a queue for an hour and 20 minutes and then came up empty. Right. I mean, it was in there maybe 5-10 minutes. I got in, bought my 4-day tickets, and I was out. Like, no big deal. But this one was just weird. It was different. And I don't know if it was because there were so many people from Europe that had been waiting so long, right? They're not just, it's not just England. It's Germany. Right. It's France. It's Italy. Europe, it's Spain, all of Europe, Portugal. You got all these people that are, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away to fly into London. So this is their opportunity finally get to go to a Star Wars celebration where for us coming over to America is just kind of not, kind of out of the question.
Yeah. So if you're over there and you're familiar, I think it's Excel Center. If you're familiar with the venue, shoot us a message over on social media or something like that and let us know kind of your thoughts on the venue. And if you've been to both, and again, maybe like Mark Newbold or Daz or someone like that who might listen to the show more regularly, just give us an idea of like what's the comparison to these venues of what people might be able to expect, and we'll be happy to pass that along. Keep moving though. Just get through the news here. Obi-Wan Kenobi soundtrack is now available on Spotify. So if you want to go check out Natalie Holt and what she did, her work on there, as well as, of course, John Williams' piece, the actual theme for Kenobi is on there as well. And it's on Spotify, and I'm sure it's on Apple Music and
it's on Apple Music. Come on. Hello.
Did you download it?
No, I'm looking at it.
You've been super busy today, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got, I just pulled it up. So it did come out. So I've got to listen to this. I really want to hear some of these other tracks.
Yep. Sorry. And then finally, let's play Albert's favorite game. What's Maz Kanata up to?
Here's a better game. Who the heck cares? I don't know. What is she up to, Jonesy? This is a joke, right?
No, on StarWars.com, they did a preview of Halcyon Legacy number 4, which is going to have an adventure. Of course, it's the adventures of the Halcyon ship. You got the thumbs down. I don't know if this is the Maz or if this is Halcyon Legacy comment.
It's both. I don't really care for either one of them, but go on. Sorry.
I tend to not really care a whole lot. I have read them, and they're cute. They're cute stories. They're for younger readers, I believe. But basically, Maz Kanata and Hondo Anaka are in this next story that comes out in issue 4. Comes out July 6th. Again, I don't know that it's going to be anything super crazy or exciting, but anyway, I just like doing this. And when I posted the show notes, I was looking at the show notes over in Patreon. We started doing this kind of behind the scenes thing, and I noticed that our show notes were pretty boring this week compared to what they were last week.
Right.
I was like, well, shoot, I got to do something in here to jazz this thing up. Speaking of Patreon, Albert, we have some wonderful Patreon members that subscribe to us, and we want to give them a huge, huge thank you.
Yes, we do. And first off, we've got the now part of the tribe membership includes Mike Borda, Kathy, Rob, and Lauren. Lauren, I didn't realize you did that. Thank you so much for upping your contributions here. I'm going to go ahead and let the Ike here comment slide that you just put in the chat because about Maz Kanata, because you did up that. But next week, no free passes. That's just not.
He
how
was
we
really
play the
just
game
quoting
right
Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I know.
It was very appropriate.
It was very appropriate. No, but thank you guys for being part of that membership and that tier. I've got an idea. I think, did we talk about the Patreon show we're going to do with our members that we kind of announced last week, at least the tier? I don't think I've talked to you about it, but I thought we would at least come back and kind of hear from, I know this is like Jonesy finds out about this stuff live, and I don't know why I don't tell him some of these things. But I thought we could talk about Kenobi. I thought it'd be relevant. We've had, you guys have heard us talk ad nauseum at this point about Kenobi, and we've got at least 3 more shows to go. But I thought it would be good to bring some of our Patreon folks on to record a show and kind of get their feedback, let them share their stories and their experiences having gone through some of this, because some of this, again, it's just stuff that we've been waiting for so many years. We've heard about it, and maybe we weren't waiting for it. Maybe we weren't expecting it. Maybe we're still scratching our heads and wondering if this was what we needed or wanted. And I thought it'd be good to give everybody a voice that wants to chime in on that. So more to come on that here very soon.
Yep.
On top of that, oh, sorry, I was going to say Delusions of Grandeur, which is our highest tier that we announced last week. We got Rod that signed up, the very first person to sign up for that one. So huge thank you. Huge shout out to Rod for his contribution and for coming on. I think he joined Discord too. Is he on? Is he?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Did I
join
see that?
Discord. Yeah.
Awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you so much, Rod.
Yep. So if you're curious about checking it out, patreon.com/thecantinacast, or I find it easier to remember, cantinacast.com/Patreon, the other way around. And again, the different tiers, the now part of the tribe tier gets you to be considered anytime we're going to do kind of a group type of thing like Albert has done in the past, or like he was just talking about. We'll come to you guys first. If we want listeners to do the show or something like that, we come to y'all first and see if anybody's interested and try to make that work. With the Delusions of Grandeur tour tier, there we go. Tour sounds kind of cool though.
Yeah.
Sounds like a rock show. Like Ozzy, and then we're going to struggle on the word. That one's after 3 months of that, you're guaranteed to be able to come onto one of our Patreon shows. You get to pick the topic. We get to approve it, of course. But yeah, we get to discuss what's on your mind and what's interesting to you. So looking forward to doing that here with Rod here in just a couple weeks or a couple months and see what we can come up with. It's purely optional, of course, but we'd love it if you guys would check it out. cantinacast.com/Patreon.
Yes. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. And as also for kind of before we get into the show, some of the stuff that's coming up here, we've got the Riva Patreon character dissection that we'll do tomorrow night. That should be a lot of fun to kind of talk about her. I've got a lot of notes that I've made in just some of the parallels that she had with her story. So we'll dig into her a little bit more. I'll try to stay away from some of that as part of this discussion because I want to save all that for the Patreon show. And just a quick note that we are going to start releasing the bits and pieces of the Patreon episode. So as part of like our normal feed. So for example, we're on episode 423 tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to actually record episode 424, and that'll be the Patreon. And you'll get I don't know, whatever Jonesy comes up with, 10 seconds, or sorry, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, he's decided to kind of pull in and kind of do that as a preview. That way you guys can kind of hear some of the discussion and, make a decision about whether or not Patreon's for you. And then, so that'll be tomorrow. And then come next Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not sure exactly when we'll land this, but the next regular release will be a character dissection for Darth Vader. And we're pretty excited about this. So it's going to be Darth Vader from the perspective of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So still in the Obi Kenobi realm, but we felt there was a story there that we could do. And I think So compared to, like, if you put those up against each other, right? The character dissection of Reva, the character dissection of Vader, I think it's going to be a really interesting, comparison, parallel. I think.
Yeah, it's going to be some interesting considerations that go into that one.
Yep. And then hopefully we'll get the Patreon here recorded soon. I just got to get the show notes together and coordinate times for everybody that wants to join. So stay tuned for that. We'll probably put something at least in Discord and on the Patreon page asking for volunteers should you want to jump in and have a conversation with us. That's all I got. Sorry.
All right. No, let's jump into the main show then. Let's kind of go over and give our initial thoughts of kind of the series overall. Like, what was your takeaways from it? Were there big moments? Were there things that you really thought hit the mark? Were there things that maybe missed the mark? And how did you enter the series, and then how'd you leave the series? Were expectations met, that kind of thing?
Well, I would say overall, the show certainly met expectations. I was a little kind of touch and go there. I mean, I liked every episode, but there wasn't, with the exception, it felt like when Vader was on screen, that was some of the moments where I felt like really excited, right? It was hitting at me at a very emotional, like visceral kind of fanboy level, right? Testosterone level, right?
Well, 45 years in the making level, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then now that we've had a chance to see the whole series, the stuff that I kind of go back to, yes, those are still up there, but the stuff I'm going back to now are the parts with like Leia and, her journey and what she did for Obi-Wan, what Obi-Wan did for her. I'll get into this in a little bit, but I think there was one of the themes for me was just this reinvention of the characters, these rebirths of these characters. And if not, and that may sound a little dramatic, I don't know, I wouldn't go, maybe rebirth isn't the best way to say it, but where they are at the end of the series is different than when they came in. And for me, I think that was the sweet spot. That was what I really, really enjoyed getting to watch and hear. And now, like I kind of did in our little, when I kicked this show off, just watching episode 4, and I've not had a chance to watch it beginning to end. I went back and watched bits and pieces of it. And I've not had a chance to look at Return of the Jedi, but I just know those scenes are going to hit very differently. So from that regard, I think it's a mission accomplished. I'm excited to go back and watch those episodes now, having that background. It's the same way I felt after Rogue One. That completely changed how I view and how I see A New Hope in a lot of ways. So, but I'll kind of leave it high level for that, because there's other moments here that we'll get into. But just what did you have as far as your big takeaways, or what you thought about the series as a whole?
Yeah, to grab on to kind of where you were going, I think when we came into it, we really wanted, or at least I wanted, to enhance the material we had. That's really what this series was really supposed to do, I believe. Yes, give us the stories within the story, but I think overall it was really to enhance everything that we had that came before it and everything that came after, and to help bridge some of that stuff with the new story, right? And I think when you take it from that perspective, I don't know how you wouldn't deem it as a success.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and really just kind of across the board too. I mean, we got, like you were talking about with Leia and even with Reva, we had stories and enhancement of characters, Leia more specifically than Reva, but that we didn't expect to get. Things with Owen that we didn't expect to get in Beru, right? And so, I think those are the things, and even tying back all the way to Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, we knew we were going to get some there, but the types of connections that we got, the types of those enhancements, just, I think they really hit the mark on every single one of them. And I gave them really high marks and a lot of that stuff. There were definitely things that, would have been better, or things that we would have preferred, maybe is more specific or a better way of putting it. But I think overall, though, it was just a good series, really, really good series. And I think it was one of the, when a show gets better every single episode, which is how I feel each episode did, or each part, I think that is a really good sign. And it's hard to get through the first couple when you're watching it in kind of real time. But if you have the patience to let the show build and to let it gain that momentum, you get a lot of payoff at the end. And I felt like we started getting payoff halfway through this thing. And every new episode, there was another payoff that we were getting. And so I like it from that respect, that it really, and like you said, when you watch A New Hope, or you watch the scenes from A New Hope, they just have completely, I wouldn't say different meanings, but they have a whole lot more meaning. And that scene, I did go rewatch, like the ending with Luke and Vader, the scene where he turns himself in, but also then the whole throne room scene.
Yeah,
man, totally blew me away. Just totally blew me away. The things that you just have rolling through your head, and if someone were to go and take that footage and then overlay some of, like, how they did the voiceovers when Obi-Wan was stuck under the rocks, and some of those types of things, and when they're flashing back and forth with him, recollecting this thing. If they did something like that with that scene, it would just be, I mean, Lauren would need like 6 boxes of tissues, because she'd be crying just so much, just, it could be like, it really has that for people who really, this hits that note with, it can really be that powerful for them to really have that completely new and a bit of a different, and, oh man, just a different impression or different feeling that you get from it was just, which I think is just a lot of fun. I mean, I'm glad when we get things like this that we leave it feeling really good, and we leave it feeling like we got something that really added to Star Wars and didn't water it down.
Yeah. So on that note, if you joined us, or when you watch the Idle Musings of a Nerdkind episode that we recorded, I mentioned that now I kind of broke the news there, but that's the next video I'm working on. So I plan on taking that footage from Return of the Jedi and A New Hope and using the voice from some of the voice quotes, or I guess some of the sound, the audio from the series, and overlaying that. So if you've had a chance, I posted one on our Facebook pages and all that for Leia. So the Vader one, I don't know. It'll probably be another 2 weeks or so before I get everything finished. But I did start on that, so I'm excited, and I think it's so far, even in the first like 10 seconds of it, I think it's pretty emotional stuff. So I'm excited about that. But shameless plug there. But I guess the question before we get into some of this other stuff here too, I get the question that so we had a chance last night, again, on Idle Musings of Nerdkind. Stephanie had never seen hadn't really seen Star Wars much at all, right?
Right.
And this was her first entry into Star Wars television. She's familiar with the characters, and then she knows little bits and pieces there. But this was really her first TV series, which I thought was a very interesting perspective to kind of go in and kind of see something like Kenobi rather than Mandalorian. They've got different kind of there's different takes in terms of what they're trying to accomplish and how the stories are set up and what you may or may not need to know kind of going into both of them.
Right.
But I think one of the things that came up during that discussion, and I want to throw this question out there for you and for anybody listening, is really about whether or not we needed this TV series. There are still a lot of people that are debating about what was the point. Did we actually need this? Who asked for this kind of thing? And I think when you go back and you look at the history of this and how originally it started off as a movie, that was in kind of development hell for a number of years. And then finally it got put into they decided to go with Disney Plus and that whole initiative with Bob Iger. It finally became the TV series. And I think some of the feedback now is, did it feel like should it have been one long episode? Should it have been, 6 episodes back to back with some of the quote fat trimmed out of it? Or did this series kind of work the way they did, where they had 6 episodes and, it kind of, did it break up the flow for you at any point? And these are like sincere questions, right? I think everybody's had a different experience with it. I know your answer, but but you've told me, but I don't know you've told everybody else. So what are your thoughts?
I think it worked okay as a TV series. And you had a lot of questions in there. Okay, so one, did we need this? No, of course not. We didn't need this. We had a lot of great content. We can fill in the blanks as Star Wars fans. They're fun for debate, all that good stuff. Did we want it? Clearly we did. Because anytime Ewan McGregor was asked about it 1,000 times, or it started to get momentum that this was going to be a thing and that was confirmed, please, everybody was super excited about this. So when people who kind of come back to me and make comments of, well, do we really need them? I'm like, but hold on, you were super excited about this before.
Mm-hmm.
It just so, and I don't ask them what's changed because I don't know that I care. But, it's just one of those things of, we wanted it. We wanted to see Ewan McGregor. We wanted to see Hayden Christensen as Anakin and Darth Vader.
Yep.
And all these other things we got was just an extra gift to all of that. Now, I think one thing is very fair criticism though, and it's starting to wear on me a little bit, and it was really with Boba Fett, was the inconsistency of the length of the episode. This is starting to bother me a little bit because it does feel very kind of herky-jerky. When you watch a Marvel one, they're all basically the same length. Mm-hmm. And they're scripted to be a standalone episode. Now, Obi-Wan went through a huge, I don't know what you want to call it, just a journey of changes, right? Of where it started as and where it ended up. So I think it does work as a movie. I don't know that you really have to trim a whole lot out. We were talking with everyone last night that there was something to trim out. And I was like, I don't really know that you need to, or I don't know that I would want to be honest with you, because I think it really does fit together that well. And I would really love to hear from someone who may have been able to go watch one of these screenings where they showed it as one film, to see how they did it. Did it really start and stop like every single episode, or did they trim it to where it all fit together as one movie? And how did that experience go? What was that like comparing to watch it on your TV at home? Mm-hmm. Because I think that would be really interesting. So if you did experience that, please do reach out to us in any of the ways. But I don't have a problem with it being a TV series, to be honest with you. I love Disney Plus because I don't want to have to leave the house. So it's fantastic for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm really happy with what we got. So it's really difficult it definitely things I wanted to be different, but. Yeah.
And I'm the same, but getting to the question of whether or not we needed the series 100% with you. No, we did not. The fact that we got it has been a total blessing, right? Being able to see all of these, seeing Ewan, seeing Hayden Christensen come back, reprising these roles, the introduction of Leia. We've got some characters that, will have a future potentially in Reva, Roken, and Haja. So that's a bonus there. We got to see different aspects of characters that we thought we knew.
I hear these Leia and Luke people get some screen time later too.
Yeah, that'd be great too, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, somebody like badass Baru and what she's capable of now. So was not expecting that. So all of that is just bonus in terms.
But Ruth's just an arms dealer, man. I don't
Yeah,
understand
that's
what the
right.
excitement is. She's just an arms dealer.
She's been one. That's why she has it. But yeah, so all of that was just a bonus. I think the people that are still like the people that went in with this saying, I don't need this, I don't want this. A lot of them are the same people that just have some major issues with Disney and Lucasfilm, right? Because they don't want anything. They don't want anything being touched, right? They don't want anything. These are sacred characters. They're the diehard Lucasfilm fanatics. They're the George Lucas, zealots that everything he did was perfect, and everything since 2015 is completely trash and shouldn't be, even viewed or watched, whatever. Those are the people that to this day are still saying, I told you we didn't need this. This is a horrible series. I don't listen to those people. Like you said, I follow them because they're crazy. But beyond that, I don't really pay them any respect, honestly, because their opinion doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. So that said, I think the people that are now looking back at this and saying we didn't need the series, I think it's a lot of it, to me, again, my own perspective here, seems to be because they didn't get what they wanted, right? And that's true of every time we go into a Star Wars movie or television series, this is what always surfaces, right? The headcanon, the expectations are too high. They had it in their head that this was going to be 6 episodes, 1 hour each, and all it was going to be is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader on screen fighting, right? And round 1, round 2, round 3, all the way to round 6, and that would be the end of the show. Thank you very much. Instead, they got all this other stuff that they weren't expecting, like new characters and parallels with Vader's thing, and people that were of the dark side power that somehow survived lightsaber wounds, when there's 8 million examples, both in canon and legends, where this happens, but because they saw it from a character they didn't like, that was new, that they felt didn't need to be there, suddenly the whole series is trash.
Yeah. So I get people are afraid, right? They're scared. I mean, it's just the general fear of saying, I love something so much, I really don't want it to be touched, because I know whatever you do with it, I'm just not going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
And some of them are actually pretty self-aware to know that and be able to recognize that and say that about themselves. But the others just aren't self-aware enough to be able to admit that.
Well, and
it's okay to be afraid that, someone's going to touch it, but I don't know.
But if we don't do this, then we don't get any more Star Wars, right? But by that, what I'm saying? George Lucas isn't around. This is the argument I get into all the time with people. George Lucas is no longer an owner. He doesn't have anything. He's an influencer. He comes in, he helps out, but he really doesn't call any shots on anything anymore, unfortunately. That was the decision that he made. But go back to why he made that decision. He made this decision because he wanted Star Wars to live beyond him. And right or wrong, he probably, I guarantee you, he knew going in that there were going to be stories that were going to be told that he didn't agree with. Right. But the fact is, this legacy needed to go on. Star Wars needed to continue to develop. There needed to be new characters. There needed to be new stories. And there needed to be stories that we could go back to and tell that have never been told. And some of this is, stuff that he kind of had tossed around at times and probably had his own background and his own, quote, headcanon, if that's even a thing for him. So all of that is playing into, we're seeing that now, but we're benefiting from that. There are so many new people that are coming on board with Star Wars, and I get it. Some of these folks feel like they're being left behind, right? They feel like they're being, I don't know, ostracized in some way because they're not part of this group, and they don't like what's going on, and they can't keep up with it, and it's changing. And now, when they used to have every line quoted and memorized from the original trilogy, they can't quote anything from the sequel trilogy, right? Or they can't relate to what's going on in the High Republic, or they can't really relate to some of the new characters in the comics because it's all beyond them anymore. And they feel like, oh my gosh, my Star Wars is gone. My Star Wars was 3 movies, man. Or my Star Wars was 6 movies, and that was it. And now you've got all this other Star Wars you guys are talking about. And for me, I'm not going to follow it. I don't want to follow it. So it's baloney. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. And that's fine if you want to do that. But guess what? There's a ton of people, millions of people now across the world that are adopting all of this new Star Wars, and this is their Star Wars. And people like us that are keeping up for it for selfish reasons, but also for the podcast, that are starting to really enjoy this stuff. So anyways, we have way off topic on that, but I think it does speak to, did we need this series? Again, no, but I think we are going to benefit from it. And we'll get into some of the characters there a little bit later. But it
actually feeds into the next question on the notes perfectly. What were the big moments in the series? If you were to ask anybody, coming into the series, what is the one thing you have to see of an Obi-Wan Kenobi series that takes place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope? There's only one thing that comes out. It's Kenobi versus Vader.
Yeah.
What happened in between? Did anything happen in between? And so when you talk about big moments, I mean, it just starts with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, what was like? So, what about it? Was it just the fight? Because when I think about the fight in the final episode, definitely. But for me, the big moment in this was that moment where I think Anakin came out and said, this wasn't your fault. And I'm kind of paraphrasing the line there, where he finally kind of absolved Obi-Wan, because it allowed him to move on and get to the Obi-Wan Kenobi that we see in episode 4, and continue that next level of Force awareness and training. But if I had to pick one specific moment, that's probably it for me.
Yeah, I mean, there were several for me, but I think that's a major one. And I think, well, really that whole scene, again, when you talk about Vader versus Kenobi, I think the part that we were hoping for, and I think it just definitely delivered on it, was when where are you coming at and where are you trying to get out of this at, right? And I think for Obi-Wan, when he came into this and we immediately saw that he was not in great shape emotionally, spiritually, and so that was that moment that you're talking about where he's interacting with Anakin or Vader, however you want to view that. And then also when he's trapped and he's, again, starting to succumb to despair and things, and then he finds that light both within him, but also those around him. I think those are the pivotal moments that mean the most, even though the action scene was really cool. The use of the force powers was amazing. We got to see things we hadn't normally seen,
right?
All the crazy lighting and stuff, it's just, you got all those, but it's those moments where they talk to one another. Even in the first fight, I am what you made me.
Yeah.
That line is just so powerful. And I actually equate that line more with what I don't believe that Anakin came through it all. I think it was more Vader messing with Obi-Wan, trying to give him that sense of it, only to say, no, I killed him. But it had the opposite effect, though, because what it did for Obi-Wan, like you said, was it said, okay, well, no, you're right. This is I can't take responsibility for your actions. What you did, and he did what he could. He could have done better, sure. And it hurts that he didn't do better. But but again, there's those moments. It's the emotional side of things. The big moments we didn't expect to get were going to be like losing Tala, or the Leia putting a hand on Obi-Wan's hand. Little moments like that, which just have these really profound emotional. They just stir all these emotional, feelings inside of you that you just don't expect to those. And so I think when you talk about big moments, sometimes it's the small moments sometimes that really have that lasting impact with you, I think, for what you get. But I think everything kind of starts and finishes with those two characters, because it has to. You really have a choice around that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Rob chimed in and said Vader's voice was awesome in this series.
That feature stuff was really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I got to hand it to him. I mean, we talked about this with the Luke Skywalker stuff, and maybe the tech's gotten better, and it probably has. Honestly, that stuff kind of jumps by leaps and bounds. But that, especially at that last episode where they were kind of mixing in and out, jumping in and out of like Anakin's voice, and
that was really,
Vader.
really well done.
Oh, dude, that was really great stuff, and even better than they did with the Twilight of the Apprentice back in Star Wars Rebels. I thought they did a much better job here. But, they used James Earl Jones's voice in that one. And you can hear it's an older voice in that series, of course, where this one did feel like it was still pretty fresh. Like it did sound like, the 77 Vader, if you will. I'm trying to think what else was kind of like a big standout moment. I mean, we joked about the Aunt Beru one, not expecting that at all.
Right.
There were, seeing the clone trooper was kind of a cool moment as well. I mean, I wouldn't say a big moment, but I enjoyed that. Just
nice little Easter egg type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, we talked about this, I think, when it happened, but just that perspective of the clones, and like, we know there were lots of clones that just continued to live on, and we were fortunate to see some of those in Rebels, but that was probably one of the more positive stories. Right. And yet you've got examples like that. And this all kind of reflects our own real world, right? I mean, we see this all the time where veterans are just struggling or out of a home or homeless, and really trying to make it as best as they can when they gave everything for this country. You got the same thing happening in Star Wars land, which I thought was kind of it was emotional too to kind of see that stuff. So I thought it was a pretty big moment. There, all of the Leia stuff was really great. I'm glad we didn't get as much Luke. I mean, it was cool to see Luke, and I was really excited when the trailer came out because we saw him jump on the hut there, and he was kind of like, pretending like he was pod racing or in Beggar's Canyon or whatever he was doing. But I think they used him sparingly enough. He really didn't appear again until the last episode, which was great. And having that moment between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and of course the hello there. I mean, we were waiting for that. I would say that's a really good moment. And then kind of ending that whole thing with a Qui-Gon Jinn appearance, which, my gosh, they were just teasing us the entire series about that. So I'm glad we got that too. But
yeah, that's a big moment. I didn't think about that. Let me spin this around a little bit.
Yeah.
Were there any big moments you were expecting but did not get?
Well, we talked about this in the final hype episode where we were kind of making our bold predictions. I really didn't know what to expect, honestly, in this series. I thought we would have a fight earlier on that would be a little bit longer. I actually do like the Kenobi not knowing who he was. I know there's been a lot of people that didn't like that too, because they think Disney's just out to ruin every hero character, and break them down before they bring them up. Which, okay, that's how storytelling works, but whatever. I don't know that there was anything I was really kind of hoping or hedging my bets that something would happen on. Let me think about that. But did you have something in mind?
Well, I think we didn't get helicopter lightsabers, so that was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're right. That's right.
I think the only part that was maybe what we were expecting is, as far as something grandiose, was probably a bit more maybe Grand Inquisitor. I know we had talked about we weren't likely to see a lot of Grand Inquisitor, but kind of what they ended up doing with him and then just kind of coming back at the very end was a little bit of a letdown, I think, in that regard. I was hoping, again, to give the Grand Inquisitor a bit. Now, he had a lot of time to shine in Rebels, but to bring that in front of a live action crowd, I think would have been cool as well. Now, we sacrificed that to get a good story with Reva, though. And I don't think you could have had both of those going at the same time. But I like that we did have that. I wish there was a little bit more of that tug and pull rather than an ending and then it just kind of coming up, at the very end, he just kind of spits on her and kicks sand in her face or something like that, or at the end, just to just kind of rub it in. But, I think that was another thing that was kind of a hope of mine, even though I knew it wasn't likely to happen. But, I think that was the only really other, big moment that I thought maybe we get that we didn't.
I failed to mention one of the big moments is Vader pulling down the shuttle there.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
his Force Unleashed moment. So, and the Reva fight that followed right after that too, right, of her trying to attack him. So.
Well, I think with Vader in general, when you talk about big moments, we expected to see Vader, big, bad, angry, pissed, powerful Vader, right? And I think every single box got checked on that one. I think this was the Vader everyone wanted to see, and they got. And then they still got at the very end. You still have that very, what's the word? This very vulnerable Anakin, that seems like he might be trying to surface. But again, there's this almost weak character trying to come out of Vader. And then the strength of Vader just crushes him again. So I think that was a really cool thing we expected to see. And we got it in spades.
Yeah. I want to go to something that was just thrown in the chat. First off, Richard was here, said, love how you mentioned waiting for the whole story. That can't be said enough. But Ken So's with us, said, has anything been said about Obi-Wan's conversation with little Leia, saying no one can know that they know each other? I thought it was a super retcon for the Kenobi series with episode 4. And then he went on to say, even as a child, she had the maturity to understand not to be familiar with him. That's a good point. Now, here's where I fall with this. Like, I get people saying that's a retcon and they're kind of it's more of, I wouldn't say a retcon. It's probably more of them trying to cover up, right, some of the stuff that they may have uncovered by having them know each other and have this. It's not even like a passing relationship, right? They have a very intimate developmental relationship. He helps her develop. She helps him develop. And then they go about their separate ways, acting like nothing ever happened when you get to episode 4, presumably. And I agree. I mean, I think Leia probably did have the mental maturity to know that they really couldn't talk about this stuff. I think that's a fair assessment because she made some very astute observations, and She made some very critical decisions that were way beyond her maturity level. And of course, we chalk that up to Leia naturally, her innate ability just to be a very mature person at her age, a leader. She was already showing signs of being a leader, making good decisions, having good judgment. On top of that, you mix in her Force abilities and what that does for her and how she's able to be in tune. And you could argue that at the very end of that, she's able to kind of know that, well, this is, even if it's a conversation with her dad there, or if it's just her and herself and the Force and just being in tune with what's going on, being able to say, you know what, this is probably something we should not talk about. So I don't think that's a wrong assessment. But I think for Obi-Wan Kenobi, if you put yourself in his shoes, if you're the adult, if you are the Jedi Master, if you're somebody who's, has in the top of the first and foremost on their mind is the protection of Luke Skywalker, and everything that's happened has to be hush hush, you're probably going to say that. And you're probably going to call up Bail Organa when you get home and go, hey, Bail, you know what? I forgot to mention this, but it doesn't need to be said, but it needs to be said. Hey, let's not talk about this to anybody. Right. So I think more than anything, it's probably along those lines, although I know that this does kind of very nicely clean up the exposure that they had. And it plays into what he's talking about, which is the very formal General Kenobi, years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars, right? I think we talked about if that message had ever been intercepted, it was going to be incriminating in some way, one way or the other for the Organas, right? But maybe it's a lesser degree of incrimination if she plays the, hey, I don't know you, and my dad knew you, but I have no relationship with you kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, you have to think about who her parents are. With Brea and Bail Organa, she has been raised in an environment of basically a political atmosphere, even the politics within the family, and how to behave and how to, what to do with information too. And while she's a child and she's 10, she's at that stage where she is starting to make sense of that and makes choices about what she wants to do. And I think by the end of the series, we definitely get that moment where she has taken that really big step where she's, she tells her dad that if we're going to do this, like, I want to do this now, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to need to do it differently.
My terms. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think that also goes with what Obi-Wan says to her, that she understands that is vital for this, because she got to see firsthand how the Jedi are hunted, how the people who help Jedi are treated, and how they are butchered sometimes. Right. I mean, those are things that if she didn't witness it directly, she was exposed to it in general, and how far people would go to hunt a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't take a whole lot to get there. That it makes a whole lot of sense to make sure as many things are swept under the rug and we're on the up and up as possible, knowing that the Organa family likely they have a bit of a target on them in general, right? Even if it's a very long-term type of target, like we talked about a week or two ago, but they're still a target. They're still on the radar of Palpatine and those types of folks.
Yeah. The next question that we had was, did we have a Razor Crest moment? And we joked about this, and what we mean by that is it's almost like an inside joke for anybody that's been listening to the show ever since Mandalorian season 2 came out. But we talked about and predicted that the Razor Crest was going to blow up before the season even started, before season 2 had even started. And so that was like this big shocking, like, holy crap, we nailed like a that was one shot in a million, right, kid or whatever. But I don't know that we had anything like that. I mean, I can't say there was anything that was just so like out of left field, right, that was just rocked our socks and to the core, our foundation to the core here. And that's probably not a bad thing. I mean, I don't think there needs to be anything, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about if there was anything that even came close to that.
Well, I think that goes back to the question of people asking whether we needed it. If we didn't get anything really monumental that we learned or that we had to watch or experience, then what was the point? But again, it wasn't the point. And so I agree with you. We don't need these giant big moments. The big moments we wanted were the ones that we knew we were going to get, and it was more about, did they do them well?
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we were able to predict successfully, some of them made a lot of sense. A lot of people got that right. But then there were a few smaller ones too that you just like, okay, well, some of these things make sense, or sometimes you just get lucky because, hell, we threw enough things on the wall. So something's got to work. That strategy is successful every time.
It is.
But no, you don't. We weren't expecting any huge moments. I think some of the question that we had was really what was going to go on with Reva. Was she going to die, or was she going to live, or what was that going to be? And I think where we ended up going, was a bit of a surprise a bit of a surprise, because I think at one point we were committed to her being dead.
Yeah.
And it just didn't.
Oh, we went in. Yeah, we went into this whole series and predicted that she would not make it out because she is a character that traditionally, sorry, Disney and Lucasfilm, they don't generally make it out of here, right or wrong. And you know how I feel about that. They killed too many of these off, in my opinion.
Right.
But yeah, no, go on. Sorry, but yeah,
no,
we
I mean,
thought she was done.
Basically it. I mean, we didn't really have any of these giant nailed it moments because there just really weren't many for us to have. I mean, if we would have had like, Quinlan Voss is definitely showing up and he showed up, that would have been huge. But I mean, us saying we're going to get Qui-Gon Jinn was evident in episode 1, right?
Yeah.
Or in part 1. And so we knew it was going to happen at some point. It was, how are we going to get it at that point?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I had kind of covered the bases. I think you said we were going to see him. I thought we were just going to get his voice, but of course it makes a lot of sense for us to see him because it's a TV show.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. And
seeing is believing.
I think really in the context of the story, it made sense for him to come to visually appear because back to the Kenobi novel, back to what he says at the very end, I've always been here. You just weren't ready to see me. I think that makes complete sense.
It's much more powerful that way.
It is. It really is. As much as I wanted him to be here's his training montage at the end of his, getting his butt kicked in episode 3, more than I wanted him to be the person that pulls him out of the rubble or tells him to get, this is not the end of you, and gives him whatever he needs to get, all that rubble off of him and then go confront Vader the way he did there. As much as I wanted that, I liked what I got. I actually enjoyed that more because that makes complete sense. And again, it aligns with the novel, which is an amazing book. So it was pretty cool. So I want to also talk about kind of the highs and lows to kind of get into this just a little bit. And let's start with the negative, right? Things that we felt like could have been better for us. And again, before anybody starts adding us for anything, we enjoyed the series. If you're just tuning in, we've already talked about, we love the series. We were pretty happy with what we got. So this is not, us trashing. And we're going to talk about the stuff that we really like, because there's probably more there. But what were some of the things for you that you felt like could have been done better?
Well, I guess I'm going to take the technical side of the show out of it for now and just kind of talk about story. And honestly, there weren't a whole lot of many things, I would have hoped it would have been more interesting, I think, for the Grand Inquisitors in general to feel like they had a little bit more meat to them. I think what we got was good. And I think it kind of whetted the appetite of like, okay, there's something more to these characters, but we just kind of jumped into them. And I think this is what Stephanie was saying in the show last night, was that you had to really know a lot about what was going on. Yeah, they kind of told it to you, but this was a show that you really had to know some of these characters a little bit better from other Star Wars material than if you were to step into The Mandalorian, right? So I think that was maybe one thing. And again, from a seasoned veteran of Star Wars, I'm glad we didn't go and rehash a lot of things. But I think when it came to characters like the Inquisitors in general, I think it would have been nice to get a little more backstory, focus a little more time on them. And I think this is where it goes to, if you had about 8 episodes or something like that, maybe you would have had a little more breathing room for those other characters to develop a little bit. But again, that wasn't the point of the story, and I'm okay with a tighter story as a result. But just from a personal preference type of thing, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more development to understand those characters a little bit better, especially Reva. I like how Reva's arc, though, went. And so I'm actually generally pretty satisfied with how Reva matured, because we knew right away that there was something else, and it just became more and more apparent. And then we finally got it. So I think that payoff, I think, was okay.
So I got a question and I want to just pause you just real quick. So, and I get what you're saying. I do. I think the question I would have then is, do you feel like we should have gotten more or could have gotten more on who the Inquisitors were, because it allowed the audience to care more about the Inquisitors? Because I think what they did, right or wrong, they brought out the Inquisitors, and it's that meme that I shared again, right? It's like, Do you know who we are? We're the Inquisitors. Check. Okay. Do you know what we do? You hunt Jedi. Check. I think from a purely storytelling perspective, I guess that's all you really need to know. But I think the point that Stephanie was making, and maybe this is what you're saying as well, is that's great, but I wasn't really able to relate to these characters. I mean, they were just bad guys running around. I didn't have the full context of who they were and what they did and all that. And the only one that you really could latch onto was Reva, because she gave us you think about like the fifth brother. I mean, unless you played the video game, you didn't care about that. we never got the name of or knew anything about what was it, Seventh Sister, or whatever her name was, with the little the tendrils. What was her? I don't even remember. I don't even remember. Was she second sister? I don't know.
Fourth sister.
Okay, fourth. Right? We didn't get anything. She had like 2 lines.
Straight.
I mean, she had 2 lines in the whole thing.
Right.
But I think that's what Steph was going. I mean, the Grand Inquisitor, of course, yeah, maybe a little bit more there. We know that he survived. There's some depth there to his character. But is that what you're saying there? Where, yeah, it would have been nice to know more because we could care more about them, even if it was a bad caring.
Bit. But I think I was also, did we really feel like they were that scary or that they were that much of a threat? I mean, they killed Flea. That was kind of a gift, if you ask me. I mean, that was nice just to get rid of Flea.
He's a good bassist, man. Don't be respectful here, okay?
What I am, I like, chili peppers are all right. So
yeah.
No problems there. But again, did we really feel like they were a really huge threat that we were worried about? Or did it really, because I think how it came across was that everybody was so focused on reeling Reva in. And I think it's the scenes on Tatooine, I think, that did this mostly, right, with the fifth brother, stopping her from killing Owen or threatening Owen and putting it down and basically say, hey, get out of here, and then corners her. And then again, the Grand Inquisitor, dialing her back. Now, I understand the Grand Inquisitor is part of that better because they are all fighting for credit with Lord Vader. And I think that came across. Did it come across clear enough or well enough?
I think your mileage varies on that one. I'm with you there. I
agree with you 100% there. Yeah. It depends on the person hearing the story and how familiar they are with everything.
Yeah.
So again, I think you just do the Inquisitors in general. I think there was opportunities there to explore a little bit more and give us a little bit more, fear them a little bit. But again, you don't want to make them so powerful or so scary that it takes away from Vader. So I get the trade-off on that, on some of those things as well.
Yeah.
Is there? I've got a couple. They're all like nitpicky though. Was there?
Yeah,
anything
mine
that
are
really stood out
nitpicky
to
too.
you?
No, mine are nitpicky too, and things that we probably talked about through the course of the 6 episodes. But one, I would say the use of the volume was a. It's just weird. It was more. I noticed it more in this series than I did than anything in the Book of Boba Fett or either.
I think we're getting used to seeing it. I think it's part of it.
Maybe that's it. Right? It's starting to set in, and we can tell when something's really great and something's not so great. You posted, by the way, sorry, but you posted something today of, or it's actually in the show notes here, of a great example where what was that? It was a behind the scenes shot, right, of the volume being used for the flashback scene between Kenobi and Anakin. And I thought that was a great example because, wow, it looks so cool. And it does not, I mean, that was one moment where I felt they did a really good job. The only thing I did go back. So if you watch that episode, what was that, episode 4 that was on? In episode 4, when they did that, when we covered that episode, we talked about how we weren't sure that was Coruscant because we couldn't tell that we didn't see any ships flying in the background. If you go back and watch, and of course, when I watched this, it was on my iPad at 3 a.m. But if you go watch it on a larger screen, you can actually see ships in the background. They're very small and they're not as apparent and they're not in your face like they were in any of the prequel movies, right? But they are there. So I mean, maybe that's again another example of that depth thing that we're having. But this is a really cool. I mean, the sets. Look at the Marble 4 on that, man. Like, what did they spend on that thing?
Exactly. But again, it's some environments it works really, really well. And I think something I noticed about this episode, and again, I kind of removed the technical side of it. This episode or the series was very dark. Like a lot of things were very dark. And actually, if you go look at some of the official, screenshots or screen grabs that they post on StarWars.com, the quality of those is not good. Like they're very grainy. There's a lot of noise in the background. If you're a photographer, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Some are amazingly clear, feel like they're 4K. These other ones feel not so much. Now, some of them are lower res. I get that, but
sure. Yeah.
If you're looking at this, when you're watching it, you see it. And I think that's part of the volume too, is that they had to reduce some of the lighting and some of these things to get the volume to blend better. And you still get this kind of washed out feeling at times.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard to criticize the volume because it's allowed us to really get things much faster than we would have. We would be so far behind schedule if we didn't have the volume. With Mandalorian and Boba Fett, all those things would not have happened in the timetable they did, right? We just couldn't have made it happen. And so, but I think there is definitely a difference when you watch some of the other, premium content that I would lump Star Wars in there with, where you have actual location shooting. And I think we talked about this with Andor, right? When you
Yeah,
do
with the Andor,
location
yep.
shooting, you have not just props, but you have a whole environment that you build out, and that you've got, physical things to interact with. The volume is fantastic because for the things that are not feasible to do or just not reasonable to do, your actors still have something to act against. And the actors love it because you feel like you're there,
Yeah,
right? You're
yeah.
not acting against a blue screen or a green screen,
yeah.
or you're not. Ewan McGregor actually made a comment about the Opie, right? So in the
Oh,
right in the original in the prequel trilogy, he was writing and having to do all the motions himself.
mm,
So if you look at it, it kind of looks like he's doing all the motions himself. In this series, he was riding a camel,
yeah,
right? And so the camel they made into the Eopie. I mean, things like that make a difference. That's not the volume, I get that, but things like that, the dependency on green and blue screens, it's different if you have something real that you can actually interact with, and an
yeah,
actual
yeah.
animal in this case. But again, some scenes are absolutely amazing. Instead of using matte paintings, you can have real motion and stuff
Mhm.
going on in the background. I think that's a really big deal.
Yep.
Because let's be honest, if you watch the original Empire Strikes Back and they're on Hoth and you've got the Falcon in the background, or was it, maybe it was Jedi, I can't remember the scene. But anyway, Han and Lando were talking. Yeah, it had been Jedi.
No, it was no, it was. I know what you're talking about. This is in Bespin.
Yes. There was another one
No,
too.
it's in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it's in
He's
Jedi.
like, I want you to take her. He's like,
Yeah.
no, I insist. It's that scene. Yeah, it's like,
Right. And there's another one.
Ugh.
And there's another one, Empire, with the when they're in the cave, in the ice cave, with all the for the rebel base,
Yeah,
where you can just tell it's a matte painting.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's a fantastic matte painting, but you can tell it's not real in the lighting, in the depth, and all of that. And I think the lighting was another one we had a huge issue with at times,
hmm
because it goes back to depth. I mean, you're everything feels more claustrophobic too. So again, I'm with you. I think we're seeing the limitations of when the volume should be used and applied, but I still think it's a fantastic tool for them to continue using. But I think we need to be a bit more selective with when those times are.
So there's a question that's come up from Stephanie, and she says, I'm not sure what the volume means. And so if you're watching the
Fair
live
enough.
stream, you can see it. We're showing it now. So this is, and maybe we've never really talked about what it actually is. So the official term, I think, is stagecraft, is what they call this, right? The volume is this studio that you see here, that it's basically a studio with a massive, massive screen that kind of almost like a 180-degree kind of round in the background. And so it allows them to put up a background that of any type, right? If it's just a big LCD kind of display, it's not LCD, it's much more technically advanced than that, right? But they can change that to whatever they want. And so it allows them to create a sound stage like this that you see here on the screen, where you've got the marble floor, which is supposed to be some kind of a level at the Jedi Academy. And then they can just put a big screen, that 180-degree round screen in the background, and change that to look like Coruscant, or turn that off and now suddenly it's Tatooine, or turn that off and now suddenly it's Hoth, or wherever, right? And it allows them to be able to do a TV series where you're expected to be able to go from location to exotic location without having to pay a ton of money for all of the crew and all of the actors and all the equipment, and while they're there, to go to these on-set locations like they've done historically. This was originally discussed back in like 1999, 2003. Rick McCullum was talking about how eventually they wanted to bring Star Wars to the small screen, but they had to come up with a way that they could reduce the cost, because it was just too costly to do that for a television series. So this was it. I mean, this has been like, 20 years in the making, 25 years in the making. They've been trying to get to this, something like this, so that they could do that. Now, Andor's a little bit different. We've talked about that, where they are doing a lot of onset and the budget's higher. But this gives them that ability, the flexibility to kind of say, oh, look, we're on Coruscant. Oh, look, now we're on, Mabib or Jabim, or now we're on, I don't even remember the other planet now. But what I'm saying? Like, just be able to jump around to different locations. Mapuzo, thank you, is another one. So there you go. That's the volume, or again, stagecraft, as they officially call it. So the only thing I'll add, and we can move on from this one, because I do, and I think I said this in the 6th episode here breakdown, but this, to me, it feels like the first time we saw the prequel trilogy, where things were cool and we could still see some stuff that looked a little odd and all that. But I think over time it's going to get better. I really do. Right, as technology advances, the ability to get a very clear, background or do darker colors. The night, I mean, every criticism that we had seems to go back to the nighttime stuff. Even if you, in Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, it just exposes itself more for all the reasons that you've already said.
Yeah.
But I think over time, I think they're going to get better with the technology, and I think we're going to see that depth come. They'll probably figure out a way to give us that in some way, whether that's just higher resolutions or whatever. Or maybe there's some kind of hybrid solution where they mix in CGI of some sort. I don't know. There's probably creative ways to do that.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so enough about that. The only other things that I really had, again, more nitpicks. I mean, I won't talk about the music because I think in the end, in that 6th episode, the way they brought the music back was enough for me. I get why they did that. I felt like at times some of the effects were kind of They weren't like the greatest. Those Snowspeeder or the was it the T-47s or whatever they are that came in. I get it. Some of that didn't look really the greatest. And all I will say is that for this series, was the first one for me that looked like a television series at times, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm all for giving me more Star Wars and all of these things, even like the volume, the music, these special effects. Like I'm willing to look past all that because I enjoyed the story at the end of the day, right? It doesn't take me out of it. But if I'm going to be critical and we're going to talk about stuff that, maybe they could do better, that's what I'm going to come up with.
Well, when it comes across as well it really, when we look at Star Wars, or even when you watch, so we're like watching Ms. Marvel, right? So Ms. Marvel's for a bit of a younger crowd, a bit of a different dynamic and a more diverse audience, but it still looks cinematic, right? And I think when you look at Star Wars, we still have that expectation it looks cinematic, and I think Obi-Wan Kenobi did look cinematic, but did it look consistently cinematic? And I think that's where you start to see a few shortcomings, both just technologically. It's still coming along, but I think it's a fair criticism. Again, our expectations of the quality of what we're getting is not television series quality, because let's be honest, Game of Thrones and shows like that completely reset the tone of what television and short form and this hour-long type of format it is. Right. I mean, it's not the same as watching, Hercules when we were growing up in the 90s, right? Or early 2000s. So, while that was good, these newer shows like HBO's producing and Netflix have just set a completely different bar. So the standard is much, much higher than where it is. And so our expectations are going to be lifted. And I think that's not a bad thing as long as they keep pushing to make things better and keep improving. I think that's where the volume in particular has to keep evolving.
Yeah. The only other criticism I have, and we've already talked about this, but I actually want to take the 6 episodes and edit them back to back to back as kind of one feature length, film feature, whatever, full length feature. Sorry. I'd actually like to do that. I don't know if they'll ever do that. And the only fat that I would trim out is sometimes when you watch a series like this that's broken up into 6 episodes, when you come off of one episode, it ends, there's an emotional high. You have a very vivid, scene in your head. And then when the next episode starts, they're not expecting you to pick up from that. Right. So they may show you some I'm not even talking about the rehash of a recap of the episode before, but I'm talking, they may do another establishing shot, or they might show a character that they just came off of and they're showing them because they want you to kind of link those two together. Those transitional scenes like that would be the only things that I would cut out, right? So you don't lose that momentum, or you don't lose the power, the emotional power of some of the scenes as these episodes end. That would be the fat that I would trim. But beyond that, to your point, I don't know that I would pull anything out. I mean, I wouldn't say, oh, let's get rid of all of the Reva scenes, or let's get rid of all of the scenes with Tala, or we don't need to see Ned in this scene, or Ned Sev or Ned B in that scene.
It's not talking about that cut. It's just kind of an editing shuffle.
Yes.
Because you've got a different intent at that point, right?
Yep.
Because you get that too. The next time you get the next episode, sometimes they do not a recap, but they say the line again, right? They cannot pick up right where they left off, and it's just redundant, or it doesn't make sense. One thing Steph mentioned is we didn't talk about the shaky cam. So again, directorial choices in that one. I think sometimes it worked really, really well. I thought it was appropriate for it.
Yep.
But it was a lot of it. And for me, it was just a little too much at times. But I don't really enjoy that style. I don't enjoy the handheld, camera type of thing very much. Cinematic, again, kind of feel like it should be on the rails and things. But I think there's some times where it's absolutely appropriate. And the times that it worked for the scene, it worked really, really well. And I was glad it was there, though. But in general, there was a lot more of it than maybe my personal preference.
The very first commercial television series, like widely viewed television series that ever did a shaky cam. Do you remember NYPD Blue that came out in the early 80s, mid 80s?
Yeah, Jimmy Smits.
Yep. Jimmy Smith was in that one. And that shocked a lot of people. Like prior to that, television was all on steady cams. It was all stable. And they decided to go with the other camera. And it like ever since then we've had it. And I like to your point, I only say that because I think there's some series that work really well. I think some don't. I think Star Wars has always traditionally not done that. I think Deborah Chow's choice to do that was really great. Like you said, in some points, and then some of the ones I would have wished they would have just had a stable camera because I was trying to focus in on, I wanted to see certain things, but I couldn't because it was shaking. And then a lot of times we know now that also is used to kind of cover up and mask certain things. And I don't know if that's the case here, right? It could have just been a purely directorial decision, but sometimes they'll do that to kind of mask the editing or the choreography isn't maybe as sharp or quick or snappy. And so they want to mask it with the shaky cam because they don't really want you to focus on that stuff. I don't know. But again, I would say it's there. It's probably fair feedback.
I think the other side of that, though, Albert, is that sometimes that adds a little more excitement to it that normally wouldn't be there.
Yeah, and
because it feels like there's more movement than maybe you were able to actually generate with the material you shot.
It's more immersive in that way.
I believe so, and especially when you're talking about something that's very boots on the ground, action oriented. So when I think about Andor, I can see where certain aspects of Andor would probably likely benefit from that type of camera, especially when there's things that are chaotic going on, but doesn't need to be all the time. I think this one probably just had a bit much.
All right, let's get on to the good stuff or the positive stuff here. What did you have? Give me your stuff that you thought like worked really well here.
Well, maybe one of the things I was most surprised about was just the performance we got from little Leia, and we talked about it last night. There's the range of acting abilities for children is really tough, because you getting them to do the really emotional things and when they get up, like showing that they're upset and things like that. And I think Vivian Blair struggled a little bit with that because let's just be honest, kids don't have that emotional depth because they haven't experienced as much in life, right? It's just, it's an unfair expectation to do it. But I think for when she had needed to show strength, when she needed to show truly being scared, when she needed to show leadership and this just, stand up tall and be who you are, I think she knocked it out of the park. I mean, you talk about, is this Princess Leia? Hell yeah, this is like Princess Leia as a kid. I mean, I was very suspicious that this was going to work out and very nervous that this was going to be really difficult. But man, she did a really, really good job. And I was really pleased with how that ended up turning out. And really kudos to her. I think kudos to everyone around her too, because usually when you have good people around you and everyone wants to take care of the 10-year-old, but the acting around you can make that person better too. And they lift her up on that. And so I think that was a really pleasant surprise that I think actually ended up being one of the main strengths of the show that really worked. If that relationship with Obi-Wan doesn't work, and I know the people who don't want them to know each other probably have a different perspective, but if that relationship doesn't work on screen the way it was written, this thing is an utter failure. I mean, complete utter failure. No matter how good the Obi-Wan and Vader scenes are, it just doesn't work and the whole thing falls apart. That's how important this relationship was to see it go through all the motions that it did.
Yeah.
And so I think kudos to both her and as well as Ewan McGregor on that front too, because they both had to do a great job. They spent a lot of time together.
Anything else before I go on to 20 minutes here?
Oh man. I mean, the force powers, I think, we kind of glossed over before, but getting to see some over the top, maybe not over the top Force Awakens or Force Unleashed type of things, but seeing Vader feel powerful, seeing him dominate Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then seeing Obi-Wan, take that step forward out of the darkness and into the light. I thought those were really, really cool moments. I mean, they had emotion and depth in the action scene. And some of the lack of dialogue, as well as the type of dialogue that we had, I think was instrumental with that. So I think when I think about the writing in general, I think the writing in this, especially between, for the scenes that he really had to absolutely get right between Vader and Obi-Wan, were absolutely perfect. The flashbacks worked really, really well. So I think they structured all of that really, really nicely. And then the action just really worked with it too. I mean, they were well prepared for this action wise. And, and the way they did the camera, there was a couple scenes. I think there was one when they were on the final battle I think, where they end up kind of getting real close. You could see they probably fell when they were filming it, but when you watch the thing, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like they just clashed and they're kind of moving off screen, but it totally looks like they probably fell.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny because you kind of hear the rocks all crumbling around them. Man, what else was there? There were some other good things too. I think Riva was a pleasant surprise as well. The emotional journey we got from her, not a surprise. I mean, we should expect some of this stuff, but we didn't know what to expect.
Sure.
But seeing where she went and how the character really moved along that story and the parallels we saw with Anakin and Vader and that struggle within her just reminded you of Anakin's journey at the same time, and Obi-Wan is kind of experiencing at the same time too. So that they finally had that connection between the two of them, and to see how she struggled to want to interrogate Leia, you always felt like there was more depth to the character. And so I like that we got so many layers to Riva, and I'm not saying we got anywhere near the layers that is possible with the character, but I think the ones that the story needed to put out there, I think definitely we got, and I think Moses Ingram did a really good job with that one.
There is a Patreon show somewhere out there for us to do where we take the conversation that is public and out there. If you ever want to go look for it, just look up, type in Google Larry or Lawrence Kasdan, George Lucas character death, something along those lines. And there's this great conversation that happened during Empire Strikes Back. I think it was during the writing of Empire Strikes Back, where they're talking about when to kill off characters, and they're kind of going back and forth, right? But there's probably a show where we can take that and take some of the Star Wars characters and talk about, should they have lived, should they have died, who was right, Lucas versus Kasdan. They had very varying different opinions on this. But I bring that up because Riva is that example, and so let me come back to that here in just a second.
That'd be fun to watch and do. Yeah.
I just thought about it. I took a note, so we got it down now in the story show notes. Okay, so quickly, the nods and callbacks throughout this entire series was awesome. I thought they did a great job. Some of the stuff was kind of in your face, overt, sure, fine, but I liked it. Some of the stuff was not. I think there's a lot of depth in the writing, as much as I know some people have been given the, exposing the, why didn't he just go over the flames? And why is Riva going after Kenobi and Luke? And I mean, you can poke holes in all that all you want, sure, but you're overlooking some of the really good depth of writing that actually did happen. So more on that here, probably when we get into the Riva discussion. The parallels between Vader and Riva, which is probably going to be the crux of our show tomorrow with the character dissection for her, I thought was amazing. Enjoyed all of the lightsaber duels, all two of them, particularly the last one, of course. And then here's really the meat of the positives.
Really, 3 of them.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, Vader and Riva had one too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, all of the lightsaber fights were done really well. The performances by Ewan McGregor, Moses Ingram, Hayden Christensen, all great stuff. Moses Ingram, for me, she was I think she had some moments where she wasn't as strong. I will say that. As much as I love her, I love the character, love the actress, there were moments that weren't as strong for me. However, those were few and far between compared to the moments where I felt she really shined. In that last episode, I mean, she acted her butt off. Like that moment when Deborah Chow goes in tight on her face and she's just sitting there and she looks like she's about to say something and she doesn't say something, that tells you that character is fully vested in that scene and in the character, and they're giving you something that, I mean, it was just truly special. And that's why she's tight on her face like that. I thought she did an amazing job in that, especially in that last episode. So I thought she did a great job. But the big one for me was, as far as acting goes, was what you said for Vivian Blair, for all of the reasons you said. Like, just kids are so easy to be hypercritical of when it comes to acting. Look at old what's his face? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
You got Jake Lloyd,
Jake Lloyd,
Logan. Yeah. I mean, you got your pick of kids that have been crucified by fans.
Yep. By fans. And I'm guilty of being critical of that too. Not to the point where bullying comes into play or hating them and all that stuff. And that's just way too far. I mean, I don't understand that at all. But anyways, going back to Vivian Blair, I think she just was a remarkable actress and she's got a bright future ahead of her, especially for some of the stuff that she gave us there at the very end. But for me, the biggest positive that I have of this is kind of, and when I brought this up last night on the show with Richard, Steph, and everybody else there, but the story arcs, Leia's story arc, Reva's story arc, Vader's story arc, and Kenobi specifically, every one of those characters, when they start this episode, are in a different place than when they end.
Right.
And that tells us that the characters grew. You may not like that. You might not agree with where they went.
But it's so important for that to happen. Yeah.
But it is absolutely important, right? If you look at like Reva's story arc, her coming in, she was an inquisitor. She was brought into this family-ish, right? But she wasn't really accepted into the family. They saw her as somebody different. And this is already, if you're listening, you're probably already thinking, well, you're talking about Leia.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's kind of similar. She was brought into this lifestyle. People were told her who she was, and she finally got to make a decision on her own who she wanted to be. But by the very end of it, for somebody like Vader, he's completely obsessed with Kenobi, and when we get out of this, he's no longer obsessed with Kenobi.
I don't know if I believe that.
I know. I do. I do. I think this is kind of the end of it, and I think
I think it's the end of it, but I don't think for him it's really the end of it. Of course,
right in his head, I think he's still thinking about it, right? But yeah, to your point, this now explains why he's stopped looking for him, and he's Kenobi's allowed to kind of live this life out there on Tatooine, and no one's really, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but
and it helps that scene with Vader and Tarkin. It didn't break that scene at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You've got Kenobi, who was completely out of touch with who he was. And by the end of this, he's found a way to reconnect, and it's through Leia and through Luke and kind of what we've already talked about. But Leia,
I want to interrupt you real fast right there, because it's more of a question. I really want to know what Yoda and Kenobi talked about before they departed one another on Polis Masi. Because what homework did Yoda give him that he failed at for 10 years? And we know where Yoda at least did, although I don't recognize that as canon anymore with the Age of Republic comic, but I know I'm one of those people now. But I want to know what that conversation was now. Like, what did you guys talk about? Because whatever you guys are terrible at planning. Right. Your strategic minds are awful, and so anyway,
I don't know. Maybe they had the conversation and Obi-Wan's like, yeah, I got it. Okay, sure thing. And then he got there and was like, man, I really, hate myself and I don't want to do all that. And he kind of just fell into it.
He's like, well, this little green guy's telling me to go meet with these priestesses and go all over but he wants me to watch over this boy. I'm getting confusing things. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Yep.
Little green gremlin.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever had a boss like that, then you know exactly what we're talking about.
Speaks in riddles.
So Leia is in, this is the one that I think it's very subtext, but she's somebody who doesn't want to be a senator. She is someone who doesn't feel like she belongs. She's not truly an Organa. She's got her own family telling her that. And it's a journey for her too. By the end of it, she comes out, accepting that she is that she is an Organa. She truly believes that she is one now. She has learned a lot of things from Obi-Wan Kenobi. Probably the most important thing was you can't just go around blindly trusting people. As much as he said that out loud and in her face, and it was a little harsh, it was the true reality of things. And I think by the end of the series, that sets her up to be the leader that she becomes when she joins the rebellion. And you can't trust everyone, right? But she was kind of looking at life through rose-tinted glasses here at the very beginning, and by the end of it, I don't think that's the case at all.
Well, she was a bit. I mean, to be honest, she was a bit spoiled at the beginning too, right?
Mm-hmm.
When she was acting a bit like a spoiled kid. But the thing I liked about her though is that her heart came out too. Like when they're on the ship and she's showing Lola to Corran, who's Corran Horn, by the way.
Yeah.
Showing Lola because they were scared and she was just trying to comfort them. I like that we still got the heart come out of her as well, because there weren't many opportunities for that to really come out for her.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that we actually got one little moment.
Yep. And there was one other one, the big one that now.
Sorry,
lost my train of thought. No, I'm trying to think what was. That'll come back to me in a second.
There's a holster and wants to shoot people.
No, I don't think that's the case. Did we talk about my headcanon about she gets her first blaster and names it Lola?
Yeah.
We did? Okay. I don't remember if that was just a conversation you and I don't know. It's been a while. Yeah. Oh, so becoming a senator, right? That's another one too. Like she didn't want to be a senator at the very beginning. She just wanted to run around, do whatever. And at the very end, she finally accepted that's going to be her destiny. Like she's really come a long way if you think about it in that short period of time. And it is because of the experiences that she had, but specifically the influence that Kenobi had and the influence that the path and seeing all that firsthand, and the charity, the selflessness that those people were showing for other people. I think she takes. I mean, she's got some of that inherently, but all of this is what kind of builds into the Leia Organa that we'll see by the come the time of Star Wars Rebels, right?
Well, and Obi-Wan also reaffirmed what Leia knew about her father already. Because when he's telling her, there's some people, because she's like, isn't the Empire a good thing? And, well, your father is one of the good people. He's trying to help people. And so I think who better to learn from and to partner with than your dad? And you already know that he's the shine. I mean, clearly he's, her parents mean everything to her, right? But there's a different connection with a dad and a daughter. It's kind of like there is with a mother and a son usually, right? And so it's just nice that Obi-Wan's affirmation of that just pushed her a little, or helped her understand that, that is a path, and that her dad is trying to do these things, and she can follow in his steps, but she can also blaze her own trail with it too.
Yeah. No, and she's kind of setting her own path there.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are my highs, if you will. Let's just get to two more questions here before we get out of here. I guess the one is, what's next for Reva, Roken, and Haja? Do you see them coming back, and if so, in what capacity?
That's a good question. Haja seems like more of a cameo character to me, where I like the character. I thought, Kumail Nanjiani did a great job with them. I think it's more of a cameo character. I think Roken probably has a bit of a future somewhere. I'm trying to figure out where that might be. I mean, maybe in something like an Andor, but again, it goes back to, we'd have to keep exploring this timeline in order for these things to happen.
Yeah.
So are we going to do that or not? Now, Reva, though, is an interesting one because she has she just has a blank slate in front of her. And so she can really go in any kind of direction she wants, and they can tell any kind of story they would like to with her adventure, whether or not she hops on board with the path and gets involved with that, or completely wants to leave all of that behind and has some other completely unrelated, life and journey that is interesting to see and see if they want to do it. So I think of the three, I think Reva clearly has the most promise, I think, from an interesting story. I mean, she's a Force user and things like that, which kind of make them a little more interesting by default sometimes. But and again, with characters like Roken, we have numerous characters like him, and unfortunately for O'Shea Jackson is that we've got Diego Luna and Andor happening. So we're kind of telling that type of story already. So do we need to do it again, or can that character work into other material to where he's in there? But I think if you were to talk about any that has any clear, huge arc upcoming, Reva seems to be the favorite in that camp.
So on that note, and I'd agree. I mean, Haja seems like a very far cry at this point. Again, maybe a cameo, likely to show up as a cameo, even like in a
just
book.
He's a fun character, yeah.
Yeah, or comic book, maybe we see him in there. I think Roken definitely is prime candidate for coming back in a future series, especially with something like Andor. Filming wise, maybe it makes more sense for like a season 2, because I think they were already done filming season 1 of Andor before they got to this one. If I might have my math wrong, they're right, but they would have to have been doing some kind of simultaneous filming there. But that character, that whole story, right? The whole path has got a story in itself. I mean, there could be an entire series just dedicated to that, where they introduce new characters, establish him as kind of that centerpiece of characters, and kind of get more into the weeds of what's really happening there as they're trying
to bring Tala back.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring in
no
Quinlan
one's ever
Voss.
really gone. Yeah, Quinlan. Oh, so on that note, so Reva though. So I would agree. Like Reva, to me, she's got the most promising future. And again, I don't want to steal too much of my thunder here, but just think about these things. If Reva is a Force-sensitive person, she has been trained in the dark side. If you think about somebody who's crossed over, they're going to have to go through some kind of purification, or they're going to need some help. They're going to need some training, right? So who would you go to? In our world during this time, there are 3 people that kind of jump out. Ahsoka Tano, somebody like Luke Skywalker, or even somebody like Quinlan Voss. And they've already mentioned Quinlan Voss, right? But it feels like someone needs to kind of take her under her wing, take her under their wing, and say, it's almost like the High Republic. Not to bring this up, always bring this up, but when Orla Jareni, when she was helping Elzar Mann kind of get back on his feet, right? It feels like something like that needs to happen. They can't just let her go join the path and kind of figure these things out on her own. She's got a lot of stuff still buried deep in her, even though she's retouched the light. Someone still kind of has to guide her. That's my thinking. And I can't think of three better people than those three.
I mean, Luke is still, 20 years away from being useful.
Yeah, well, sorry. No, that's fair. Luke is probably not going to be doing this now.
I hadn't really considered Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But yeah, from someone who's actually touched the dark, though, I think
Quinlan.
Quinlan seems to be the ideal candidate in that regard because he brought himself.
Well, I was thinking, like, imagine their powers together. This is stuff I want to get into on the show tomorrow. But yeah. Quinlan's power and her power, and what would you do with that? Like, what kind of setting? What kind of missions would they go on? Man, I guess that would be cool too. Okay, but more on that tomorrow. I don't want to dig into that too far. Okay, final question before we get out of here. Season 2 has been talked about. People are speculating whether or not we're going to get it. Are we going to get it? Are we not? There was rumors that they had done Reva's ending because that was going to lead into maybe a season 2. Again, rumors only. The question is, are we going to get a season 2? And do you want a season 2? Back to how we started this off. Do we need a season 2 of Kenobi?
Do we need a season 2? No. Do I want a season 2? No. Are they going to give us a season 2? I want to say it's probably like a 25% chance. I don't know that it's much higher than that. I know the interest in that, but again, you'd have to. It's not Obi-Wan and Vader then. It's something different. Mm-hmm. And do we need to keep bringing, if we're talking about, is there a series with Kenobi? And do we need to keep bringing Obi-Wan in some adventure and taking him off Tatooine every single time? How do you make it not seem like it's just retrotting what you've already done?
Yeah.
And again, what story are you wanting to tell? I think we got the story we were hoping we would get, and I think we got it well. And so I don't know that we need to rehash. Well, we definitely don't need to rehash it, but I don't know that we need to water it down and flirt with, not breaking anything, because clearly I think the one thing that did not happen with the series that people were terrified about was going to break canon, and that it was going to, do this, or was going to water down or lessen some of these other scenes. And I think if anything, it made some of those scenes make sense within them telling the story they wanted to. They found ways to make sure it didn't break. And I think in some ways enhance those scenes much stronger scene than what we've ever realized them as, or realized in the past. So yeah, maybe a small chance they'll do this, but again, I don't know. I've been racking my brain thinking what story they would tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the hard part to come up with, is like, okay, well, what's interesting? Maybe it would be a brand new original story. That'd be something, but what is that something? You've got 9 years in between. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably on every level there. I would, to anybody that says that this series watered down anything, I would say, not to be snarky, but your focus determines your reality. And if that's what you're going to focus on, then okay, well, sorry. But what I would say also is, as far as a season 2, do we need a season 2? No, I don't think we need a season 2. In fact, I think if they brought in a season 2 and we went back to this Vader versus Kenobi kind of thing, I think it especially undermines that scene with Palpatine and Vader saying enough's enough kind of thing, right? You're focusing too much power, too much time. And for all the reasons that we talked about on episode 6 of the Sith, and how that breaks the rule of 2, goes against the grain with regards to the rule of 2. So that it undermines that. And I think it undermines a lot of the stuff that happened that was established in this series, right? Especially those confrontations of Vader and Kenobi in episode 4, and then the references that we get in episode 6. Okay, so I don't think we need it. I don't necessarily want a season 2. I think I'm pretty happy with the way it ended. Do I want more Kenobi? Do I want to see Ewan McGregor back on screen? Absolutely. The problem with calling it a season 2 is that it implies that this is a continuation of that story. And to your point, I just don't know how you get there. Like, I don't know what story you're telling where Kenobi is still connected to Vader in some way, or it's a pickup of this, especially now that he's going to, I guess you could argue now he says what Luke Skywalker really needs is a father. And so maybe that's his way of saying, I'm going to be a little bit less hands-on. I'm not going to be watching over him every single day of my life. And maybe I am going to take a jaunt over to some other planet doing something. maybe that's the case. But here's where I think if they wanted to go to this, the only other Jedi, we talked about Ahsoka and Quinlan Vos, the only other Jedi that could really help her is going to be somebody like Kenobi. And so maybe it is a series where you've got Reva and Kenobi. It's still Kenobi. Maybe it's not. Maybe they call it something different, but it's really about what he's helping her through. And maybe she's having to go and venture off to do certain things, or she gets mixed up in something. I don't know, where she's looking to him as the master, right? He takes on another apprentice, so to speak, to kind of get her back on her feet and get her to where she needs to go. It's just, it gets real kind of tricky though for me. I think him constantly leaving off world at that point.
Yeah, and I think if we flip the script a little bit here, though, if we were to say, okay, maybe we want or need a Vader series, and I think that one's very interesting because the comics have done a lot with Vader, which I think are really good, interesting stories that people would probably like a lot if they got to see them. And so there's a part of me that says, okay, if we flipped over to Vader, and maybe this is more of a post Order 66 Vader where he's hunting Jedi, and we bring some of those stories that both Charles Soule and I forgot who did the original, Kieran Gillen did. You know, some of those type of things might be really interesting to see as well, and see, okay. And you could bring the Inquisitors in too, and you can kind of bridge that gap. So again, you're still kind of squeezing the turnip a little bit, but at the same time, it is an interesting part of the story that hasn't been told to the broad mainstream yet. And it's still leveraging things that feel connected in a way. If you're Disney and Lucasfilm, you're still nervous to let go of your cash cow timeline.
Yeah.
Right. Which is this 40 years or 50 years of the original saga. Right. And so I could see that being one way of it being a kind of a follow-up, but really it's just a different story and more on Vader. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anywhere in this 10-year time with Kenobi, but it could be something either before or maybe after. If you're really on board with having Hayden Christensen specifically in the Vader suit for a longer stretch of time beyond just Ahsoka.
Yeah, I'd be down.
What would you think about that?
I think people would just, someone would argue we already had a series with Vader and that was, episodes 1 through 6. But what you're talking about is a very specific story they're telling, and I would be all in for that. Right? I mean, we're fortunate to get the stuff in comic book, but to see that on screen would be great. I don't think there's anyone that would say that's a terrible idea. Certainly people would watch it. It's going to make them a crap ton of money. And as long as, again, as with all Star Wars, really, as long as it's bringing something to the table and giving us more context of what happened, I think it's a good thing. I wouldn't be against it. It's
a dangerous thing, too, because Vader gets his butt kicked a lot. And so the kind of the quote unquote wimpification of Anakin or Vader is it's a very dangerous and very slippery slope in that regard in that time, because Vader is still very much learning how to be Vader. The Emperor is smacking him around and knocking him down a peg. But then again, you see Vader taking it out on people too.
Yeah.
But there's a really cool Jedi scene in there too that would be really cool to talk more. We've talked about it in the past, but from the comics is great stuff. But again, I think there's stuff there. If you're nervous to get away from it, Lucasfilm, there's things there. And, Charles Soule just got optioned for one of his stories, just got optioned to do TVs and a movie and all this other stuff. So now we've got a guy who's not only written books, written comics, got a creative job at Lucasfilm now, Disney, or whichever.
I think creative consultant or creative director or something like that. What's his title? Something along those lines.
Something like that, something official. And then, and now he's going to be adding screenplay and all of those things to his resume. I mean, you've got a person here that knows the character really well and it knows Star Wars, and he's already part of your creative teams. He's already neck deep in High Republic and stuff. So this would be another, you have people around that can be part of the process, even if they're not directly responsible for it. But if you wanted to adapt any of those types of things, you have a lot of opportunities. You have the people around to do it, and they're going to be around for a while. So you don't necessarily have to worry about doing it quickly either. You can allow this to kind of rest for a bit, which I think is the best move anyway. And again, we know that it takes a while to make these things and write them. So I think we're probably going to have a bit of a quiet period with the Kenobi, with this timeline between, except for Andor, of course, but this timeline before New Hope.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sure they have their eye on Charles Soule. Okay, before we get out of here, just a couple comments that I wanted to highlight. Were there any Jeans guy moments in Kenobi from Kenso? I didn't see any, but
I didn't notice any. But then I'm not really looking for that stuff either. So
it'd be funny if there were. I didn't catch any though. Lauren just screams Quinlan. I think that was from earlier when we were talking about. Steph says, I don't really want a second season. I think she's in agreement there. Albert and Jonesy, you guys rock. Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. Appreciate that. That's our very own Stephanie from Idle Musings. And let's see, what else? There was one other one that I wanted to highlight. But no, that was it.
Well, and yeah, Ken had in their different story with Kenobi, definitely, but not a continuation of this. So that's fair too.
No continuation. Oh, I missed that one. Yeah, sorry. That's the one. That actually was the one I want to talk about. So there's a couple different options. There's lots of things that we're going to go about doing. It's all going to come down to money, time, and availability for a lot of these actors and all that. But
we've got a lot of questions. I mean, and Ken had a ton of questions and a lot of feedback. So thanks for all that, Ken. I think something we might end up doing now is we might do a Q&A about Kenobi, or we could open it up to anything. But if people want to, share their thoughts and ask questions about Kenobi, about where they're at, and maybe things we haven't considered, or if things we need to revisit, that would be maybe we'll do something like that here in the near future too, as people continue to digest what we've seen and be able to do some rewatches, and maybe we'll be able to see a full six-part. That was a Freudian slip. A full 6-part combination or end-to-end movie type of representation and presentation of this.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. That's probably enough. Don't forget, we've got our Reva character dissection tomorrow, and then we're going to come back and do a Darth Vader character dissection. And this is going to be from a character dissection based on this series here. I think there's a lot to talk about. So before we get out of here, do you have any shout outs, Jonesy?
Yeah, let's do this. So again, if you're listening to the podcast, we do have a live stream. We do this typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays, time permitting, 9 p.m. Central, usually for a couple of hours. So tonight, great chat. Jonathan, Steph, Lauren, Sky, Richard, Jorge, Rob, Ken, Stephanie, Gary, and anybody else who is lurking in the background and just watching. Thank you guys so much for all of your participation and all the great conversation. And we love y'all. And again, go check out Stephanie, Matt, and Richard over on Idle Musings of the Nerd Mind on earlymedia.com. Give that show a listen. Great crew.
Apologies too. I said a nerd kind because it is a play on Close Encounters of a Third Kind, and that was in my head because it's one of my favorite all-time movies. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks for all the great comments. You guys are great too. Really do appreciate you guys joining in.
See y'all tomorrow night.
And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. So
yeah.
And I got new credits. I updated the dang credits. So everybody's name's on here now. If you're a Patreon member, your name is on here unless you signed up in the last hour and 42 minutes.
You get a name on a credit. You get a name on a credit.
All right. See you tomorrow.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.